So I'm Raghi Iyengar, founder and CEO of Manufacton. I'm based in Boston, and Alan asked me to provide the kind of the U.S. and Canada perspective on the transition to industrialized construction. A little bit about my background. Over 30 years in construction and manufacturing as an industrial engineer. Before starting Manufacton, I was with Autodesk helping pull together the construction product portfolio with Revit, Navisworks, and BIM 360. And during earlier in my career, I was as an industrial engineer at Intel, learned all things about the design, manufacturing, construction operations for all of Intel's factories worldwide. And as part of that, I was an advisor to the Center for Integrated Facility Engineering, SciFi at Stanford University, which I think is a really good think tank that has led to a lot of work that's happening today in terms of 4D and project collaboration and the whole virtual design and construction. So in terms of, started Manufacton in 2014 to bring the best of manufacturing to construction. So what Manufacton is a software platform. It's hosted on Amazon Web Services, works with any browser, your iPhones, iPads, or your tablet, Android phones and tablets. And the whole idea with Manufacton is you can break a building up into, say, 1,000 pieces, and then you can actually manage the offsite, production, and then the delivery to the site, and then the on-site installation. So kind of manage the whole life cycle, and also track all of the materials that go to the factory and other things that might actually go over to the job site to complete the whole installation process. So you can basically use Manufacton to manage the entire life cycle of the process. And whether you're a trade contractor or a modular builder, a panelizer, as Brian was saying, or as a general contractor that's kind of managing the whole process. So, well, I can spend the whole day talking about Manufacton, as Alan asked me. I'll kind of talk about what we are seeing in the U.S. around the offsite construction movement. So kind of why move to industrialized construction? I'm sure you all have seen the McKinsey report that talks about, that came out last year, and that talked about how by going modular, kind of going from thinking about a building as a project to building as a product, you can start, the costs are lower, and I think very importantly, the time to revenue for some of the owners that are getting these projects going, the time to revenue being sooner. And of course, everyone's talking about the improved resource recruiting. So we have heard a lot about the fact that it's easier to find. That's what our customers are also telling us, that it's easier to find people to come work in the factories than it is in the field. And I'll kind of talk about that a little more later. And we've been kind of seeing some of that. And of course, everyone has been talking about by taking things offsite into a factory setting, you can improve your productivity, reduce your waste, and better quality, better safety, and so forth. So this McKinsey report last year actually was adding more fuel to the fire for people to move to industrialized construction. So now, if you think about it, and again, I'm looking at it from the context of what's happening here in the US and Canada, and everyone is asking, why now? And I've been in this trying to make construction like manufacturing for over 30 years, so it's a question of why now. And what is happening is you had all of the housing, there was a severe housing shortage in the US, so they were all trying to figure out how can we build more and build faster. And then the other interesting thing that's been happening here in the US is skilled construction labor in the field is becoming less and less and less available. So older folks are retiring. New people are not interested in coming and working in the job site. So there's a shortage of talent. So everyone's trying to wrestle with what do we do in light of the shortage in the workforce. And I'm sure everyone's seen this the productivity chart that has said construction productivity has stagnated over decades, while manufacturing has increased significantly. And there's this big everyone has been trying to figure out how can construction become more and more like manufacturing and kind of improve the overall productivity. And unlike in other industries, in construction, it seems to be that the cost continues to go on increasing. So that's been the overall thing that is kind of driving over the last few years, has been driving more and more and more of the movement towards offsite construction, or people are calling it industrialized construction or modular prefabrication. But the whole idea of doing that, and then COVID happens, and now everybody is looking at, hey, what is this going to look like? Coming in out of the new normal. And I've been in the middle of all these conversations over the last couple of months, where people all are, construction companies are all thinking that, hey, could this be the tipping point for industrialized construction? Is this going to be the same when we come out of this? Or is it truly going to become the idea of moving construction from the factory, from the field to the factory? And that's what some of the things that we have been seeing across the board. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not about pure volumetric or panelizing or trying to do the entire building modular. It could be pieces of it. So what we have been seeing over the last several years is you've got your trade contractors, you've got the mechanicals, the electrical, the trade contractors that have been doing prefab for a long time. And now they are actually, over the last few years, wanting to do more prefab. So they are driving more and more work into the factory. So here's T.G. Gallagher, Interstate Electrical, a couple of examples of companies in the Boston area, which are very sophisticated. And they've actually built a culture where they're saying, hey, for the team in the field, don't build anything in the field. If you need something, send in a field request into the factory and we will produce it and send it over, and trying to make things more and more efficient at the job site. So we're seeing more uptake in the single trade contractors as they're kind of moving through to drive more and more work away from the field to the factory. And then you see these larger general contractors. So they're all starting to talk about how to set up their own factories. So PCL, one of the large general contractors in the US and Canada, they have set up a sophisticated factory with what they call PCL Agile in Toronto, in Canada, where they are doing all kinds of single trade, multi-trade, panelizing, and modular. So it's like a multi-purpose factory that they have built in Toronto, while DPR, yet another larger general contractor, has completely created a very powerful, good panelizing factory that they have built in Phoenix, in Arizona. And also, by the way, DPR acquired a bathroom modular factory in Florida. So the general contractors are getting into the game where instead of only managing the process, they are starting to set up their own factories. And then you've got Skender in Chicago that's taken it a step further, where they actually acquired an architectural firm and they've set up a factory. And for a steel-framed volumetric modular, they're calling themselves a vertically integrated design, manufacturing, construction company. And then you have a company like Factory OS, which is the new breed of modular builders that are entire new companies being built from scratch, where they are doing volumetric wood-framed residential units and so forth in California. And we're starting to see this new breed of modular builders. Some of them are building their own factories, while others are kind of modular builders, but they're factory-less, where they actually use factory capacity of others to support them. So it's kind of, I've seen that before in the semiconductor industry, where you have these fabless semiconductor chip companies. So that's same kind of an approach, where a modular builder with all the expertise and know-how, but then they're leveraging others' capacity instead of building their own factories. So all of these different things are going on in terms of trying to get as much of construction as possible off the field and to the factory. The other interesting thing is the whole idea of what does that do to the job site? And now we are seeing, and as Brian talked about as well earlier, and said, as did David and Joe, we are starting to see the job site becoming more like an assembly plant. So what it needs is, if it's going to be an assembly plant and if things are going to be done more and more off-site, you need to make sure your supply chain is well coordinated. So this is an example of Consigli, a general contractor in the Boston area, where they had a project in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which was on a very tight lot. We had 2 streets on 2 sides and 2 buildings on the other 2 sides. And there was no laydown area, no space to store materials and so forth, where they actually brought in the steel sequence from Canada. They brought in wall panels from Pennsylvania, and entire bathroom modules from Florida that were all brought in just in time, coordinated, because there was no storage space. And in real time, they would bring everything in and complete the assembly process and run through that whole thing efficiently. And every step of the way, everybody in the process, including all the players involved in it, all the stakeholders, had real-time insights into production status, delivery status, and what was happening across all of the different companies, so it could all be well coordinated. Another interesting dynamic with this, which I'll talk about later, is SurePods that I mentioned here, which is a bathroom module maker in Florida, is actually now owned by DPR, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a general contractor. So here you had the interesting dynamic of Consigli, a general contractor, technically being a competitor to DPR, who's also a general contractor. But in this project, DPR happened to be a subcontractor, a bathroom module manufacturer to Consigli. So we're starting to see this shift in relationships and the dynamics of companies working with each other, which is also kind of getting amplified with this whole movement towards offsite construction. So switching gears, what we are seeing, and that's what our customers are telling us, and industry folks, especially here in the US and Canada, I know it's different in other parts of the world, but over here, what people are seeing is this movement where you're talking about, phase 1, where, companies are saying, where do we begin? And many of them are literally saying, you know what, let's just take construction from the field, move it to the factory. So if you're creating, for example, 10 rooms that you need to build, literally create 10 stations in the factory, each representing a room, and the team of workers goes from room to room to room, completing their scope of work. And through the process, the 10 rooms get created. But if you really think about what they have done, they have literally done what they would do at the job site, but they're doing it in the factory. So they're like, at least we have some efficiency gains by having everything being done in the factory, less waste, and better quality control and a better working environment and so forth. And that's kind of almost like phase 1 is what we see. And then all of them are then starting to talk about, if that's what we are doing, why are we having the teams move? Instead, why don't we create an assembly line where in the factory we can actually have 15 or 20 stations, production stations, and we have dedicated teams for each of the stations, and that the room can move from station 1 to station 2 to station 3. So that's how we're seeing the next wave that's been going on by trying to get the whole assembly line. And from there, we're seeing the tipping point, and as Brian was also talking about, the idea of using advanced materials. So everybody is now talking about, why are we restricted to what materials are being used for stick-built construction at the site, where we can be more creative in terms of what we can actually do more efficiently in the factory. So I think the whole idea of advanced materials is kind of the next wave that we are seeing around with the whole idea of industrialized construction. And finally, that is going to pave the way for more and more use of automated manufacturing techniques, robotics, 3D printing, and truly being able to take advantage of building these components and the sub-assemblies, assemblies, and creating modules and so forth. So that's some of the things that we are seeing here based on what our customers and folks in the industry in the US and Canada are talking about in terms of how they see the progress for progression for the industrialized construction. To kind of kind of sum things up, the interesting thing, and I think both Joe and David touched upon this, and I know Brian did as well, which is now you're talking about this move towards industrialized construction or offsite construction is creating this need for, opportunities and need for like new business models, new metrics, a totally different mindset, because if construction companies now need to think of themselves as manufacturing companies. And so in that context, as I described earlier, the relationships, it's no longer two companies competing with each other. Instead, it becomes situational where two companies might be competitors, but in another situation, in another project, one might be the customer, the other a supplier. And in a third case, it might be the other way around. Especially if, like, say, for example, a general contractor also owns a panelizing factory. And say another general contractor owns, like in DPR's case, a bathroom modular factory. So the dynamics changes and the relationships all become situational. So construction companies are kind of coming to grips with that, and also looking at that as opening up, additional opportunities for them in terms of, partnerships and so forth. The other thing is all around the whole idea of capital. You got to spend, a fortune to set up a factory in order to build out your manufacturing capacity. And then the whole idea of understanding the, what is the backlog? What's your utilization? Are you at only 50% utilization, in which case you need greater backlog? And where's the backlog? Can we get more projects in? What if you suddenly, based on your projects, you need to be at 125% utilization? Then what do? Do you figure out how to do some overtime? What portions of it can you actually flex? Because you don't want to spend that much more capital to build another factory if you're only 25% above capacity of your current factory. So balancing that load and understanding what you need to do to how do you try to be, as capital efficient as possible. That's again the other completely new thing for construction companies to grapple with and and come to terms with, and that's been a lot of focus as well. And then start looking at it from an operational perspective. Things like productivity and how do you become more efficient. How are you agile in terms of your production process? In terms of what is your lean. Are you lean across the board right through the whole life cycle? Everyone talks about quality, and manufacturing has been dealing with total quality management, where quality at the source across the whole life cycle is an ingrained culture. So kind of building those kind of things, and obviously safety will always be an important aspect. Clearly, safety in a factory setting versus on the job site, there are already the benefits because of the fact that it's in a better scenario of controlled environment and so forth. But I think the most important thing in terms of, from an operational perspective, is to build this culture of continuous improvement. The companies that I have seen build that culture across their organization are the ones that are becoming most successful with this drive towards industrialized construction. They're building this whole idea of, okay, let's measure, analyze, and implement an improvement, measure again, and that whole cycle, and everybody taking ownership across the whole board. So that continuous improvement culture is something that we have seen in customers that have that, seem to be the ones that are the most successful. So to kind of sum it all up from our perspective, from a Manufacton's perspective, what we see in terms of how Manufacton is helping this whole transition to industrialized construction is, we support the entire design to manufacturing to construction process. Autodesk is a strategic partner, actually a strategic investor. They invested in us early on as a part of the whole our focus around industrialized construction. So we got a good partnership there. And we built the platform to literally, from the ground up, to support companies working with each other. So collaboration between companies, and within companies, kind of the whole life cycle from design to manufacturing to construction for the design for the office and the factory and the field. So those are the things that we built right from the ground up. And that's where now we are being seen as a really good platform to support the whole design, manufacturing, construction workflow. So as Brian was saying, you can build out the kit of parts with your product catalog, and not only just the product catalog of what it is that your kit of parts is designed to do, but also your process templates on how are you actually going to produce those in the factory, and driving BIM to not only do production, but BIM for installation, driving the bill of materials coming out of it, tying it into the schedule for the pull plan from when is what needed in order to help drive the design backlog, but also to drive the agile production plan and understanding what your manufacturing backlog is, so that if things change at the site and the requirements are different or priorities change, your production plan can be needs to be agile so that you can take on other projects or other loads in order to manage your utilization of your factory. And then the whole idea of driving your materials inventory in order to build your components, sub-assemblies, assemblies, the modules, and so forth, and take those over to the site. And then driving on the site, as we were talking about earlier, ensuring that you have a good visibility into the supply chain to make sure if you know what's being produced, where, when, how far along is everything, so that there are absolutely no surprises when everything does come over to the job site. And then you complete your whole installation and provide the whole turnover verification. So that's, in a nutshell, is really what Manufacton has been built to support. And we're excited to have individual, single trade contractors to modular builders to general contractors, all leveraging this platform.
That's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Raghi, thank you.